Welcome back to Carneades.org. Today we are going to be starting a brand new series in honor of the upcoming presidential elections in America. This series is entitled, Do Third Parties Destroy Democracy? Arrow's Impossibility Theorem and the Problem of the Third Party. So before we get to kind of the main topic of this, which is going to be that question around can we have a fair voting system when we have more than just two parties or more than just two choices, we're going to cover a lot of ideas in voting theory and different ways that you can vote to kind of build up to that idea. Now, many places around the world have held or will hold elections or referendums this year. In this series, we will look at a problem for voting theory. Put simply, whenever there are more than two candidates in the race, it is impossible for the voting system used to be fair. This paradox is known as Arrow's Impossibility Theorem. Now, before anyone who's a defender of a third party gets up and gets too frustrated with that, we are going to look at both arguments for Arrow's Impossibility Theorem and arguments against it, kind of trying to answer both sides or give some justification for both sides of that question, do third parties actually destroy democracy? Now, in this video, we're just going to be offering some basic definitions of the terms that will be used and kind of a roadmap of the other videos in this series. In fact, for the next 2 weeks, we're going to be doing a video every single day covering one of these topics. And then for the next month or so leading up to the elections, we will have these videos maybe once a week to continue on some of the kind of bigger or longer and more complicated ideas. First off, let's look at a preference profile. So a preference profile, as we will examine it, is a ranked list of voters' particular choices. It includes all of the candidates or options with no ties. Now, there are other kinds of preference profiles that can have ties or might just include one of the candidates. We're only going to be looking at situations where all the candidates are listed and there are no ties. The first listed is the voter's first choice, the last, their last choice. Looking at voter B here, they have Clinton listed as their first choice, Stein as their second, Trump as their third, and Johnson as their last. Take a look at this set of voter profiles. So we have 5 different voters here, and they each have a different profile. They each have a different ranking of the candidates. D, for example, ranks Johnson first, Stein second, Clinton third, and Trump last. We're going to be looking at a lot of different voter profiles like this. Now, voting systems. The job of a voting system is to take all of those preferences and give us a societal preference. So to look at all those different preferences and then give us a similar list ranked 1, 2, 3, 4 of what the society as a whole prefers. And that's the society's preferences. Now, some voting systems are going to provide a full list of preferences and some will just output one winner. We're going to focus on the systems that output one winner because those are the systems that are used in most elections around the world. But we'll explain paradoxes for both types of systems. Another important distinction to be aware of is the difference between majority and plurality, because that's going to feature significantly in the following videos. A candidate has a majority if they have more than half of the votes cast. A candidate has a plurality if they have more votes than any other candidate. Note that a majority implies a plurality, but a plurality does not imply a majority. If you have more than half of the votes that are cast, then no one else can have more votes than you. But if you have more votes than anyone else, that may not necessarily mean that you have more than half the votes. And we're also going to be looking at how we can decide between different types of voting systems. There's a set of desirability conditions that we want a voting system to meet. Basically, these are criteria that try to make the system more democratic or more desirable. The paradox arises because it is impossible for any voting system with more than 2 options to fulfill some very, very intuitive desirability conditions. So the first series we'll be looking at is varieties of voting systems. That's going to start today and continue all this next week. Then we'll be looking at making voting more democratic, desirability conditions for voting systems. That's going to happen all next week long. Then we will look at a single video on May's theorem, which is the case for the two-party system. Then we'll look at Arrow's impossibility theorem and the problem of the third party. This is where the main argument kind of against third parties is going to be offered. And finally, we'll look at some arguments for third parties and how we can avoid Arrow's impossibility and some alternative voting criteria. So, that's the roadmap for moving forward. Watch this video and more here at Carneades.org and stay skeptical, everybody.